at Beautiful Literature. I am so glad that you are part of this live session. I want to welcome you and hoping that we can have an interaction, we can have some discussion, and we can get to hear from you and also to learn quite a bit as far as set books are concerned. And like I had promised some time ago, we will be having a discussion on the excerpts today. The other day, if you didn't check on what we were doing, we did on essay writing. It's up in our live feeds. You also can check on poetry. We did tone, mood, and attitude in poetry. And today I thought I'd want us to do the excerpts, and let's go into it in the interest of time. And before we start attempting some questions, because I would want us to attempt some questions, both from the Fathers of Nations and from the Samaritan, because like I had said in the essay writing presentation, it's important for you to know what will be tested where. And remember, I told you that for the current Form 4s, you are doing the Samaritan as the essay question. That is question number 2 in the paper 3. But in the excerpt in paper 2, you will do the Fathers of Nations, okay? But for the Form 3s, you will do the Fathers of Nations as an essay in paper 3, sorry, and you will do the Samaritan as the excerpt in paper 2. I am hoping that we are clear. So these two books, for the Form 3s and the Form 4s, you will need them on whatever front you will need them. And so therefore, I would want us to just have some basics first before we attempt the questions, because really I may not have the time to look at every detail. Like the two examples I have, I may not go into a lot of the answers and all that, but just giving you some skills on how to handle excerpt questions. Now, like I've said, I need to do some brief introduction on how to handle the excerpt questions. One is that the excerpt question appears in paper 2. If you're writing paper 2, that is where you need to handle the excerpt question. So if you're doing paper 2 is when you need to revise the excerpts. And as you do that, it's important for you to know that the excerpt carries a higher mark than actually more than the essay itself, because it carries 25 marks. Actually, do you know those are 25 free marks? Those are marks that you can score as high as 18, 20 marks. When you have really failed, you can get 17. If you can easily actually score 25. Why? Because that is something you're being asked and it's right there on your desk. It's like a comprehension. It's something you don't even have to think so much. Not like maybe the grammar or poetry or something. You have the answers there. But why is it that it's not easy for students to score a whole 20 out of 25? What is this that students will struggle with? And I'm hoping you don't struggle as such. But if you do, here we are, and that's why we are handling this discussion. Now, I wanted us to begin by saying that therefore, carrying 25 marks in an exam, it's high and therefore needs to be given the attention it deserves. It is important for you to know that if at all you are to hack or to understand excerpts and score high, you must be able to understand the storyline. If you don't understand the storyline, you will struggle with that question. When we were discussing about the essays, I told you something that I personally encourage students that do not be limited in your essay writing. In your choice of the text that you're using to write your essay from, do not say like, for example, the Form 4s and insist that I am a Form 4, I'll be tested on Samaritan, so I can only do on Samaritan. No, you can actually do an essay on the Fathers, even if you're not in Form 3, you're in Form 4 and you'll be tested on Samaritan. The same thing with the Form 3s. When you're supposed to, you will only be tested on the Fathers in your essay question in paper 3. It is okay, it is recommended, and it's highly encouraged that you also practice to write essays in Samaritan, which you will not be tested on. Why? Because as you write essays, it exposes you and pushes you and actually demands quite a bit from you and expects you to understand the plot a little bit more. because if you just concentrate on what just the small part for the excerpt, you may be limited in your revision. But when you start to write the essay, you'll be able to capture so much, and by you are kind of revising, you are familiarizing yourself with the story, you're familiarizing yourself with the plot. It is challenging you to think about the storyline from the beginning to the end. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is that there are some questions that we will come across, and we will be looking at them. We will come across, and those questions, if you do not understand the story, you will not be able to answer those questions. And they're not 1 mark, 2 marks questions. They sometimes carry heavy marks, and therefore it will be a challenge for you. And it's really up to you to find ways of making sure that you understand those questions well. So let me go and say, number one thing for you to make it in excerpts, you need to have made it. You need to have understood the storyline very, very well. But when you're doing excerpts, you must restrain yourself in that excerpt that is on your question paper. Do not gather answers from other places in the text unless you have been instructed to do so. We'll see some of the questions that we have here. In fact, the questions I have chosen for this discussion have something like that. Unless the question specifically is asking you to refer from elsewhere in the text, or is asking you before this what from the rest of the story, from the rest of the novel, from the rest of the play. If there are no such words, you should always use the content that is in that excerpt on the question paper that is in your hands, or the excerpt that you're referring to. Anything beyond that, before or after that, don't go to it, because the illustrations that you give, for example, and they are away from the text, that does not score a mark. And I will give you an example. I'll give you an answer to that when you're attempting the question. So that is important for you to know. And then the other point that is also important for you to note is that the marks given in every question, like I said in the other parts, are a strong indicator of what exactly you're supposed to write. Never ignore the number of marks given in every question. For example, if a question has got 2 marks, it means the examiner most likely is expecting 2 points or something, at least 2 points. There are some questions that you're expected 1 point and it will get 2 marks. But I always say what is safe is to ensure that if a question has got 2 marks, ask yourself, do I need to give 2 points? Does the material provided in the question, or the much material that I can get to answer this question, can I get more than 2? Can I get 2 comfortably? Can I get more than 2? I encourage you to go out of your way and always write more than what is required. I mean, just give us more points. I see students who are very brief, very scanty in there, and very sketchy in their answers. You can see a question is asked, and then it's 2 marks, and then they have written like around 3 words. And a sentence that is so short, sometimes it's even an incomplete sentence. They don't begin with the noun and with the subject of the sentence. And trust me, you will not get a full mark out of that. So I want to encourage that as much as possible, write all that you can find to write. Of course, not all, literally, but give us more content, give us more to your answer. Don't be brief, don't be sketchy, because you are denying yourself some marks that probably you should have gotten by simply going. So if the question has got 6 marks, for whatever reason, like for example, if you asked a question like the one we will look at, what happens before, place this excerpt in its immediate context, and those are 5 marks, or maybe sometimes it's an even number, so it's 6 marks. And then you go ahead and write 2 sentences. Do you imagine that 2 sentences would give you 6 marks? That is not going to happen. And so you lose so many marks, and because you didn't consider what is the weight of that question. The question is expecting you to acquire 6 marks or even 4 marks. So ask yourself, therefore, how many points do I need to write for me to acquire the 4 marks? Because most of the times you actually have those points with you. They are not, you're not looking and gathering all over. You actually have those points. Why don't you go out of your way and tell us about those extra points that you think? I'm hoping that that is clear, and therefore let me go into the questions that are frequently asked. Maybe this is what is major, this is what is key for me. I think if I'm able to take you through this, you will be far much better. And so we will look at what when you're dealing with excerpts, what are these questions that you will always, because the questions are the same, what are these questions you will always find in excerpts? And I hope you have somewhere to write down. Kindly note them down. And just to mention, this is something I had done in another video that is, I will attach it also, so that maybe after this, but that was a bit caught up because I was talking about paper two, so I talked about many things. But today we're talking about excerpts only. So I encourage you to go back because even that video, there are notes. They had attached some notes to it. So just go back and look at it. Maybe down in the on the playlist, you'll be able to find it there. And the frequently asked questions, let me go into question number one. I hope you're writing down. The question number one that is always available is, what happens immediately before this excerpt? What happens immediately before this excerpt? And on the same note, either or, you can be asked what happens immediately after this excerpt. Okay, so what happens before this excerpt and what happens immediately after this excerpt? Those are two questions that you will always find. That one, if you want a leakage of the exam, this is it. You will always find that question. On the same note, let me also say that question can also be phrased in this way. Place the excerpt in its immediate context. Place the excerpt in its immediate context. Those three are variations of the same. And the question is, what is expected when we're having that kind of a conversation, that kind of an answer that needs to be answered? What happens immediately before this excerpt? You see why I was telling you that you need to be familiar with the plot and the storyline? Because if you don't know what happens before, you really don't know. And you can't answer that question. And most of the times, that question, like the one we are dealing with today, briefly explain what happens just before the excerpt. It is 4 marks. So, 4 marks, what happens before this excerpt? It means you need to give us points that will give us 4 marks. And so, if you're not familiar with the story, you will struggle with that. And the other challenge that students will have is, what exactly do we mean but immediately before? Because you realize a student can give us way before. How immediate is immediate? How do you know this is immediately before? Now, what happens is, what exactly we need is, when you open that page in the textbook, that within that page or the page before, what happened around there? It is the page before, not like in that chapter or at the beginning of that chapter. You're taking us way before. Now, even if it is true, it is correct, it happened before this excerpt, it is not immediate. And so that answer will be incorrect as far as the marking scheme is concerned, because from the marking scheme, what we are looking for is immediately before, like a page before what happened. And so you are expected to bring out the events or the things that transpired immediately, or maybe they are the ones that led to the conversation or to the events of the excerpt. This excerpt has been triggered by whatever happened before. You need to, that is a tricky question if you do not know the story very well. And that's why I'm saying, why don't you try writing essays a little bit more? Because when you write that, it provokes you to even just, crisscross the book like back and forth. And along the way, you're able to know what happened before. In the same way, what happened immediately after, you need to tell us within that page, or in the following, that within that page after the excerpt is done, and the page that follows, just around there. Don't take us 2-3 pages later. That will not help. That is not immediately before and will not be in accordance to the answers that the marking scheme or the examiner had put as the correct answers, and therefore you will struggle. Now, you will not get a mark for it. Now, let me say this, that a question that someone would ask. For example, sometimes you have a place where it is not an event that is following up. Maybe I should pick something like that. It is not events that are following up that you're able to say that this is what happened, and then after this happened. It's something where we have something like a style that we call authorial intrusion, where the author is the one speaking. Intruding is to intrude. I hope you know the meaning of the word intrude. Intrusion comes from the word intrude, that in this flow of thoughts, in these events that are happening, the author decides to first of all take us away from the characters and the events that are happening and provide us with some information that you actually cannot say. If, for example, we are acting, is where the actors on stage, they have someone, a voice that is speaking. Why? Because probably there is no possible way of acting that part. Actually, we can only have some part, apart from the cast, have someone reading that loudly so that we can hear the author's voice. I hope you get that. It's a style. We call it authorial intrusion. Now, sometimes if what happened before the excerpt is authorial intrusion, how are you supposed to write that? For example, randomly, I had not prepared for that, but randomly I have picked something on page 105. That is in the Fathers of Nations. And page 105, chapter 8, the beginning of chapter 8. This is where we meet Pastor Chiamaka and how he's a reckless driver and how he drives dangerously with an elbow sticking out of the window and a radio blaring out in the latest hit songs. Other drivers got no pity whatsoever for him, so he changed his. Now that is exactly what the author is telling us. We are not seeing any conversation that is going on. And imagine maybe you're given an excerpt where the brother is talking. The brother is talking to that is on page 106, where you're having the conversation between Pastor Chiamaka and his brother Obina. And so you ask what happens before. How do you state that? Because there is no action that is happening. It's actually the author who is describing something, not necessarily this. How do you go about that? I think that's something I would want to hear what you think. How do you go about it, and how would you handle that? Maybe we'll come back to that when you're dealing with that. We are dealing with these questions that we have, because I know that the question we have on fathers will take us to something like that. So I hope that question you're almost kind of getting sorted out on that. But before I finish up on that, I will want to address the issue of what happened. Place this excerpt in its immediate context. That's a question that it's two questions in one, because you are expected to tell us what happens before and what happens after. Okay, when you ask to place the excerpt in its immediate, I'm repeating for you. When you're expected to write the context, I mean the excerpt, place the excerpt in its immediate context, you're expected to tell us first what happened before and what happened after. In other words, we want you to place it somewhere before and after. What happened before and after? So because it's in the middle, what happened before and what happened after? That's why you're asked to place it in its immediate context. What happened before and what happened after? So that now we are finding it in the middle of somewhere. Now that is the expectation in that question. And most of the times that question has got more marks, has got many marks. Why? Because it's a double, it's two answers, it's two questions in one. And so if the question has got 6 marks, placing it in the immediate context, that means that the before has got 3 marks and the after has got 3 marks. So as you write your answers, you should ask yourself, this what I've written before, will it give me 3 marks? This that I've written after, will it give me 3 marks? Now, that is really up to you. The answer that you give, ask yourself that question. And a question that most of the students will ask, do I need to write up there before and after? Yes, it is okay to write. But again, just indicate, just before, immediately after the margin, just write before, and then give your paragraph. And remember, this question is always answered in a paragraph, not in point form. Write before, and then go ahead and explain what happens before. Then you can probably just keep some small space and write after, then put a dash and go ahead and explain. It's okay to do that, because sometimes some of us will write from the beginning to the end as one paragraph, and you're expecting the examiner to figure out which is before and what is after. Really, actually, from the examiner's point of view, you really did not even understand that question. Whatever you're giving could be correct, but it's so disorganized. We are not able to tell what is before and what is after. So when you're dealing with that question, place the excerpt in its immediate context. Write before, just the normal way you write before, dash, explain. Then after you're through, leave some small space. If it's a full stop, leave a full stop, a line, then go to after, dash, or dash as the punctuation mark, then explain, in another paragraph, then you're done with that question. When the examiner is marking, therefore, there are marks allocated for before and marks allocated for after. And ensure that the marks, if for example the question has got 4 marks, it means there are 2 marks for before and 2 marks for after. I hope that question is answered. That is a question you must always find. You must always find that question. That one you will get it even with your eyes closed. So make sure that you understand the story. What is the other questions that you will always find? This will depend on the kind of questions, but let me first of all talk about the ones you must find. You will be told to identify the character traits of probably the characters that are involved in that excerpt. So you will always be asked to discuss some character trait somewhere. So you, at the back of your mind as you're going into the exam room, you must be armed with adjectives, you know. If, for example, you're dealing with the fathers, and already in class you've already dealt with the discussion on character and characterization, you should always ask yourself, am I ready? Do I have adjectives at the tip of, you know, my fingers, such that when I'm asked about the character traits, what are the character traits, for example, of Melusi, maybe the excerpt you're given has something to do with Melusi, and so are you aware of the character traits that you would attach to Melusi, so that whatever excerpt you're given, you can comfortably pick? And remember, we talked about adjectives, that some of us are struggling with that question, not because you don't know what to say about that person as far as character is concerned, I mean characterization is concerned, but you have no clear or accurate adjective to describe that, and so you should find your way of making sure that you're comfortable with adjectives and the adjectives that are needed for the character and characterization. You will always be asked that question. The other question is on the themes. You'll be asked, maybe from this excerpt, what themes will be found? What themes are found in that excerpt? You must somehow be prepared and know in this text, the fathers of nations, what themes are there. You know that many themes that are there. There is as many themes as poor governance, there is corruption, there is manipulation, there is violence, all those things. I mean, whatever themes, the theme of family, the theme of what, you should, by the time you're going to the exam room, you should be comfortable with that question. I mean, with the themes, so that whatever excerpt is brought, you can comfortably now look at that excerpt and be able to just identify very easily, because you're familiar with the excerpts in the whole, the themes in the whole text. And sometimes that question, when you're told, it's given, like for example, you are asked to identify 2 themes, you must make sure that you give a proper illustration. Let me also go back and talk about the character and characterization, or maybe let me first of all talk about the styles also, because you'll be asked to talk about the character and characterization to identify the themes in the excerpt. Remember, you should not take us away from the excerpt. Always, whatever you're giving, you must find your illustrations from the excerpt. And also, you'll be asked to talk about the features of style in the in the excerpt. Now, those 3 questions, especially if you just give an answer without an explanation, without not an explanation, an illustration to back up what you have given, trust me, you will not get a mark for it. In fact, we call it guesswork. For example, if you ask to discuss the character trait of what, maybe you should look at the example that I'm going to give us here. Maybe that is where I should start off. Now, allow me to read for you this excerpt here, and maybe so that this, as we answer these questions, we can refer to it. And I wish I was able to, but let me just read for you, and then you see in your head, are you able to pick that from, if maybe this is an exam, it's a short one, it will take me like 2 minutes for me to read for you. If, for example, you brought this excerpt, are you able to place it in its immediate context? Are you able to tell us what happened before and after? Just listen. When all 4 were back at their seats, the chair began to wrap up. Excellencies, we have come to the end of our summit. He smiled. And why not? Had the trick not saved the day? Had it not eliminated the need for the consensus he could not achieve? Go back home safely. Excellencies, as we say in my country, travel like lions without fear of attack or worry about supper. And speaking about supper, the Pinnacle informs me that to cap our summit, it has organized a closing ceremony on the mezzanine floor. Things will start sizzling in 30 minutes, so we will meet there soon. Gravel hit the wood. Bang! Now I declare the summit itself formally closed. Bang, bang. President Dibonzo sprang to his feet at once. Mr. Chairman, don't insult our intelligence with that rubbish. His voice was grating on all ears with tones of rage. What rubbish are you referring to, President Dibonzo? Asked the chair. He was rising to the challenge. The choice matrix, indeed. Do you really expect us to buy into that madness? Can you see can't you see that some of us are not senile? We reject the matrix, lock, stock, and barrel. I said the summit stands closed, insisted the chair. Bang, bang, and I say it is open, retorted President Dibonzo. But President Dibonzo, you do not have the power to do so? Who says I do not have the power to do so? See this. He pulled out a pistol, pocket size, with other heads of state. The other heads of state scrambled to hide under their desks. President Dibonzo, put that thing away, demanded the chair. Make me, retorted President Dibonzo. The pistol clicked. It was ready to start spitting fire at the chair. Now that is our excerpt. I don't know why you people say that the fathers is boring. I mean, which part is boring there? Don't you think it's really funny? It's really interesting. I find it very interesting. So let's use that excerpt. Let me ask you, are you able to place that excerpt in its immediate context? When you hear that excerpt, yes, I hope my reading is clear. Are you able to tell, by the way, that you may not be able to tell it's in chapter 8, chapter 10, chapter 15, chapter 1, but you know it is not at the beginning. It is not at Seamount Hotel. It is not when Longway and Melusi are discussing at the hotel. You know this, you can comfortably tell this is at the end of the play and the end of the novel, when the summit is already over and we are just about to finish actually. So when you're looking for it, you look for it at the end. Are you able to tell that? Because if you're not able to place, even have an idea, it's around chapter, what could that be, chapter 13, chapter 14? The last chapter is chapter 14. Are you able to tell that is in chapter 14 or chapter 13? If you're struggling with that right now as we speak, it means you're not comfortable with the book and you need to familiarize yourself with it. Now, listen, I want to, from that, to ask you, if you, like, for example, one of the questions that is asked here, I wanted us to have a look. Identify and illustrate two character traits of the summit chair and one of President Dibonzo. That is 6 marks. Can you imagine? And before that, you had been asked the question, briefly explain what happens just before this excerpt. So 4 marks. So just before this excerpt, 4 marks. So you need to raise that and make sure that that is done well. And now, question B is one that says, identify and illustrate two character traits of the summit chair. So that means you're supposed to give us 2 of the summit chair and 1 of President Dibonzo. So those are 6 marks. So now that means that for each of them, 2 and 1 will give you 2 marks. Now, for your information, like I had said, you must always illustrate your answer. If you say, for example, the chair is dictatorial, for example, is one of the examples we can give. That one of the answers. Why would you say he's dictatorial? Have you seen the way he's handling this meeting? And with the banging, and saying, I mean, the meeting is over. When President Dibonzo is saying the meeting is not over, blah, blah, he says, and who do you think you are? You didn't open this meeting, so how would you say that it's not closed? I decide when it's closed, so that is dictatorial. So if you say he's dictatorial and then you don't explain why he's dictatorial, you will not even get even half a mark. Can you imagine? So why don't you just go ahead and explain that he is dictatorial and explain he is dictatorial because blah 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 blah. You explain. So if you, for example, you're talking about President Dibonzo, maybe you can say that he's temperamental. I know some of us will talk about his hot-tempered, his short-tempered. The best word to use is temperamental, to mean that someone gets angry quickly. And so therefore, when you say he's temperamental, you need to explain why you think he is temperamental. Do not give one one word answer without an explanation, without an illustration. When you do that, you will not get a mark for it. And so therefore, I wanted to raise that because not just for the character and characterization, but also for the themes. For example, there is a question part C. What two themes come out in the excerpt? And maybe before I come to that, when I talked about dictatorial, I see, like we are talking about adjectives, I see students saying that he is a dictator. He is a dictator is not an adjective. A dictator is a noun. So you don't use nouns to describe character and characterization. You use dictatorial to say that, I mean, he's a dictatorial person. You cannot say he's a dictator person. You get, that's how you're able to tell. Is how do you tell? You can check on that. Boys. You can see whether for you to check whether it's a dictatorial. Always remember an adjective. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted. Um, for you to tell whether it's an adjective, always remember an adjective will always modify a noun. And so I say, for example, she's a beautiful girl. Beautiful always comes before the noun girl. So whatever word that you think is an adjective, imagine if you put a noun behind it, will it be okay? For example, he's a dictatorial leader. Okay, and so you're saying that therefore that is okay, but you cannot say he's a dictator leader. So dictator is a noun, it is not an adjective. Are we together on that? How? Because I find students struggling with how do you tell whether this is a noun or this is an adjective? You are able to tell whether it's a noun or an adjective by trying to put a noun, a noun after an adjective. That way you'll be able to see, does it even sound right? If it sounds right, then that's okay. If it's not, also along the way you're able to differentiate between a noun and an adjective. Remember, a noun also you're also able to give it pronouns. I mean a pronoun. So he is a dictator. So if you're not able to give it a pronoun, then it becomes a problem. I mean, it becomes a noun. And so, if, for example, you asked to identify the themes, what two themes come out in this excerpt? Now, for example, maybe I wish we are in a place where I can ask you to chat and maybe you can do that. What themes do you think have come out in this excerpt? Have you found anything? All right. Maybe I should give you a minute to write down for me. What theme do you think is coming out from this whole situation of the chair trying to silence President Dibonzo and President Dibonzo saying, no, that is a lot of nonsense. You think we are not, you think we are senile. Do you think we are out of our minds so that you come and play us here and make us imagine that you don't know what you're trying to do with this whole thing about the choice matrix? It is a trick for us. You're tricking us into doing whatever is not sorry. Do you think we are not able to tell what you're doing? So identify the themes that are in that excerpt and make sure that you explain. If you say, for example, there is the theme of violence, for example, and you don't explain that violence you have written there, it will not even bring you, it will not bring you any mark. If you talk about poor leadership, for example, there's poor leadership here. Both of them, the president and the chair, because even the chair is a president, is poor leadership. As you talk about the poor leadership, you must explain why do you think there's poor leadership. Remember the question, like this question has got 4 marks. So for one, the poor leadership, the explanation gives you, the answer poor leadership gives you 1 mark. The explanation gives you another one. So that gives you 2 marks. But if you wrote only poor leadership, you will not get 1 mark, you will get nothing. So poor leadership, 1 mark. Illustration gives you another mark. So I am hoping that as I repeat that, you're getting it very clearly. The other question is on the styles. Like, for example, you asked to identify the features of style that are used in this excerpt. Identify them. Like, for example, I've seen a very good one of the rhetorical questions. There are quite a number of rhetorical questions that are there. Of course, there is the use of dialogue. And we said you're not talking about styles on the Samaritan. Or on a play, you cannot pick dialogue as a style, okay? So because it's the main style that has been used, dialogue in a play. So you cannot say there is the use of dialogue in a play, but in this, there is dialogue between the chair and President Dibonzo. So you can use dialogue, and sometimes I keep saying, I don't understand why students fail these questions, whereas some of the styles are so clear, so open. I mean, it's so obvious. We can actually just see. Who cannot see there is dialogue there? You cannot see those before you even go to symbolism, irony, contrast. Before you go to those heavy styles, leave those ones. Go to the obvious ones, the ones that we can see. The will not deny you a mark because you have given an easy style. You not look like you are a better student because you have given us a very, I don't want to say a difficult style, but those complex styles. Like talk about, just those extreme ones. Why don't you just pick what is there? Just pick what is easily there. Like issues of dialogue, you'll never miss them. Issues of, for example, here we have the word. We have the use of the rhetorical questions. You will have easy ones. I mean, find for the easiest ones that you know. So when you go into the examination room, make sure you've also revised on the various styles that are used in the book. Just go through that. Go through that. It will help you. And so that is another question. I needed to handle those three: themes, styles, and characterization. You will always find them. Let me also say another very important question that you will always be asked: explain the effectiveness of the style used, or the answer probably you given. Like, for example, you can be asked, explain the effectiveness of the style in question number 2. Okay, so question number 2, you had been asked to identify 2 stylistic devices used in this poem. I mean, in not poem, in this excerpt. And so now you also probably on the same breath you're asked to illustrate or to explain the effectiveness of that style. In my video on the styles, I mean the use of style in the Fathers of Nation, you can look for it on the playlist. You will find, I think I did almost a whole video explaining about the relevance, the significance, the effectiveness of a style. And we say that every time when the author uses a certain style, he does so for a reason. Number one, to develop a theme, to develop a style, I mean to develop a character, and to develop the what do you call it? To develop the plot, that's the storyline, to develop a theme, and to develop a character and the characterization, therefore. And so most of the times when you're looking at this question, that style, for example, the rhetorical questions, what is the role of those rhetorical questions? Maybe has it been used to develop a style? I mean, a theme? Has it been used to develop the storyline? Has it been used to develop the character of that person who is asking those rhetorical questions? For example, that in this question about the rhetorical questions, they are being asked by President Dibonzo. Actually, the way he's asking those questions, he's saying, no, it's the chair who is mentioning, who is saying that and telling them you can go home safely and so what. And so now, when you look at that style, what does that tell us about the chair? Do you say he's patronizing? Do you say he's dictatorial? I mean, what kind of a person is he? So when you ask what is the effectiveness, what is the role, what is the significance of that style, you should always have at the back of your mind that any of those, any of the styles will develop either the character, will develop the plot, or will develop the theme. I hope you're noting down. If you don't get that very well, because I won't spend a lot of time on that, kindly check on my video on styles. I think it's part 1 of the Fathers of Nations that I have explained so well with very good illustrations. You'll be able to understand that. Let's go on. The other question that you will find, and I think it's important for us to have a look at that, is this is varied in the sense that it can come in very many forms, and it will test on your grammar. Remember the grammar questions that are tested on paper 2, the last part, 15 marks. This can also be tested there. For example, you're given a statement and you're told that statement from the excerpt, and you're told to give that the question tag of that statement. How do you write question tags? And maybe at this point it's important for me to mention that I get very disappointed when students don't get this simple point, that question tags, the safest way to make sure that you get a full mark on question tags, rewrite the answer, rewrite the question. When you're writing, for example, let me pick one sentence here, and there's one for being senile. What is that? Do you think we are senile? Can't you see that some of us are not senile? Can't you see that some of us are not senile? Now, if, for example, you're asked to write a question tag, some of us, after that, I just go ahead and write the tag at the end. But I keep saying that for a question tag, for you to get a correct mark, we are expecting that there is a comma after the statement before you write the tag. There is a comma, and the tag itself is supposed to start with a small letter, and it's supposed to end with a question mark. Those three things must be in that answer. One, there's a comma after the statement where you're putting the tag. Before you put the tag, there is a question mark. The tag itself, the tag I'm referring to, can't we, aren't we, doesn't she, Iso. Those ones are the ones I'm referring to as the tag. The tag must always begin with a small letter, not capital letter, and then it must always end with a question mark. So if an answer does not have those three things, therefore that answer, even if it was correct, you will not get a mark. So the reason why most of the students fail is because they are lazy. They don't want to or they don't know. Now, going forward, you know that any question on question tag, you must rewrite it. Write it down so that you have an opportunity at your own space to put a comma, because most of the questions, if you insert an answer you at the end, you squeeze it somewhere, that question ended with a full stop. Now, will you go after the full stop and put a comma? No, you're supposed to rewrite it afresh so that you put a comma, and then the tag, you begin with a small letter for yourself. So most of us will leave it and just squeeze the answer there and say, like, for example, don't we? And you begin with a capital D. That is not okay. And you put, even if you put a question mark, it will not give you a mark. So there's that part of those questions that will ask you. Sometimes you'll be told to write the negative of it, or change that into direct or indirect speech, or you ask to change this sentence into passive or active voice or something. I mean, there's that question on grammar. It can come on very many fronts, and really sometimes you really don't even have, you don't know what will be tested as far as that is concerned. For example, this question is on the question tag that we have here. Let me see the other one that I've gotten for us on the Samaritan before we go into the last bit of this presentation. I can see that. I can see that question very well, but I hope that is clear. As far as that part of the grammar is concerned, you will always find one question. It's always one question on any part of grammar, and you can try. Sometimes you can be asked to punctuate that sentence properly or something. Whatever you're asked as far as that question is concerned, please go ahead and make sure that you give it the right answer. Now, let me finish up with this. Like, there is a question here and unfortunately I can see our time is far much gone and we may not be able to have a look at it. And there's an excerpt I have here. I'll post it in the group for those who are in the group. If you're not, please feel free to join us. I want to read for us that question. So that the one we are saying about the other, allow me to find it. Yes, the excerpt is about Miyamoshi. It's actually at the beginning of the story, and it's bringing us a situation where Miyamoshi is complaining, has been told that his name has appeared in the app, and he's saying those allegations are not true. So the question is asking, from your knowledge of the rest of the play, what two things does Mosi suggest could be done to control the use of the Samaritan app? Do you see? From your knowledge of the rest of the play. Remember, I told you that all the questions you answer must be in the excerpt. But there are sometimes, unless you're asked to quote or to give an answer from other parts of the play. So that is why I was saying you must understand this text. You must be familiar with the book, because these are 2 marks. From your knowledge of the rest of the play, what 2 things does Mosi suggest could be done to control the use of the Samaritan app? That means, apart from what is in the excerpt, go into the other parts, other discussions that these people had, and what was Mosi's suggestion on what to do with the app. that means you are at liberty to go into the other parts of the story apart from what is in the excerpt. Let me also go on this, the other question, and this will be the last, the last. From your knowledge of the rest of the play, briefly explain the origin of the Samaritan app. 4 marks. From your knowledge of the rest of the play, that means apart from the excerpt you're given, you have been given the freedom to go to the other parts of the story to explain what happened about how did the app come up. And this is where now you will talk about the Albano and Montana and how they had come up. There was a competition. You need to go through. Remember, it's 4 marks. So whatever you, please don't write 2 sentences and imagine you'll get 4 marks. You must, like I said, when you're writing the essay, learn to brainstorm your answers. Learn to scribble down some things on the side and ask yourself, these 3 points I have, if I start writing them down here in this space I'm given, do I have the points to give me 4 marks? For always plan for your answers. If, for example, Kwanzaa, a next question has got many marks, on the side, using your pencil, why don't you try to scribble some things on the side? Because you're testing how much information you have so that you don't start writing and then you realize your space is already full, you have points you have not written, or this answer was not okay, I think I should not have written this, let me cancel, let me go back to the teacher to give me an extra paper, let me write at the back. If only you sat down and planned that question and, thought on the side, it becomes a bit easier. Now it's just transferring. Now, a question like this, when you're told to briefly explain the origin of the Samaritan app, you need to take a minute and ask yourself, where did the app come from? The app began as a school competition, inter-school, national competition of innovation, innovation and technology. And there were many people who came up. There are many other students in other schools who came up with many innovations. But Alvano and Montana, assisted by teacher Nicole, they came up with this app that was accepted. Actually, it won. And that's why Mayor Mosi is coming to launch it already, when it's already been accepted, tested, and tried. And experts have said it is okay. It meets the required the requirements for it to be used as an app. And so therefore, on this question, you are expected to go back and ask yourself, with all these info, and remember, it didn't begin as a political app. It began as one for environment, where people can engage as far as how do we preserve our environment, how you can report things that are happening in our environment, pollution, so on. So it began that way. But then as it went on, they realized it is gaining attention and is gaining feedback. They actually, now it was escalated into something else, and they created other pigeon. They were calling them the pigeon holes, and you need to understand that. And so for you to get the 4 marks, you need to ask yourself, what are the 4 different points I need to give for me to get the 4 marks? So ideally, what I'm saying, let me first of all finish up on that so that then I can give that word of caution. The other question that you will always be asked is, explain the meaning of the following words and phrases as used in the excerpt. That's a question that you will always find. It is the same question that is in the comprehension. In the comprehension, the last 5 questions given, you can be sure you'll be asked to explain the meaning of those words, the meaning of those phrases. What is the meaning of those words? Now, I said sometimes you even have no clue what that word means. You have never even seen it. You have never even come across it. Like, for example, there is a word here, amorphous. Explain the meaning of the following words and phrases as used in the excerpt. Supply of air, inflation, discrete, amorphous. Which one do you know there? And maybe sometimes you don't know any of it. So how do you go about it? Do you leave the 5 marks and say, my goodness, I don't know these answers, so let me just leave it blank? And by the way, while I'm at it, let me remind you that when you leave blank spaces, you are being funny. You actually deserve to be punished, because you, while you are just watching, you are losing marks. Marks that would actually have, would actually maybe take you to the next point. Let me say that. And seems like I'm starting to give life skills in the middle of the lesson. Sometimes you come across questions and you clearly have no clue what that question is testing you on. I always encourage, please do not leave blank spaces. Always scribble something. Do guesswork. It's called intelligent guesswork. Guess. I mean, you're not blank. You've been to class, you've heard something. Even if you're not sure whether it's the correct answer or the wrong answer, just write down something. Can I tell you why you need to ensure that you don't leave blank spaces? For 2 reasons. Number one, me as a teacher, if I come across a question, a paper, a script from a student with blank spaces, immediately I get an attitude. I imagine this student is so disinterested with learning. This student does not even care. This student is lazy. This student, I mean, teachers are human. So me, the first attitude I get when I see maybe one or so some blank spaces, they may not really be an issue. But can you imagine probably a question on poetry, you leave all the five questions, or you leave like three questions with, I can see so many blanks on your paper. First thing I get for me as the person who is marking that exam is that this student is not serious. This student is a joker. This student actually does not know anything. As I mark that paper, I mark that paper with that at the back of my mind. I'm already annoyed. I'm feeling so bad. Why would you leave blank spaces? One, therefore, leaving blank spaces affects. You remember we talked about the tone, mood, and attitude. The mood of the atmosphere of marking that paper is already very bad. I'm already feeling very demotivated because so you expected me to set exams for you. I bring you, you write the answer, your name on top. Then you bring me back when it's blank. Then I come back and give you the sheet back. Then I give you the answers. You write the answers and put it away. I mean, I have every right to feel bad. So don't affect the mood of your teacher by leaving blank spaces, because probably when the mood is very bad, it will also affect how that the rest of the marking will go. Now, let me also show you when you write when you write answers in your blank spaces, how it will affect when you write answers, you don't leave blank spaces. When I come across a student who this answer given, they don't seem to really have an idea what it is, but I think they are trying. I think they are trying to think. Yeah, I'm looking at the answer you're given. I'm thinking, my goodness, what is this answer? But the fact that you tried to write something, for me, that is a person. I don't know how the other teachers do. Maybe you can tell us if you're a teacher and you're watching this, or even later on. Just let me know in your comment section. When I see a student who has tried to write something, I get very encouraged, even if you don't have a clue. Instead of getting annoyed that you're writing a lot of nothing, I at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, at least you didn't leave a blank space. So sometimes I want to be nice and to be motherly, and I'm thinking, let me try. Could there be a point you had? Maybe you had an idea, and maybe I'm trying to kutafuta, just to find, could there be an answer that you're having, and the question has got 4 marks or 2 marks. You may not get 4 marks, but I'll give you maybe a half a mark because you had an idea. It's only that it didn't come out so well. I'll give you half a mark somewhere. I'll give you, instead of 4 marks, I'll give you 1 mark. Why? Because you attempted, you tried. Okay? Now, this question is 4 marks, and I've given you 1 mark because you tried to explain something, even if you are a bit off. The fact, maybe there's like a sentence you wrote that made some little sense. That's what I'm saying. And I give you 1 mark. Maybe I go to another question that you also are doing intelligent guesswork, and I was a bit merciful, and when I looked, I gave you another half mark. And another question, probably I also gave you another half mark. By the end of the day, in that paper, instead of leaving so many blank spaces, maybe because of the attempting to write the answers, you have gotten around 2 or 3 marks that would actually not have gotten if you left those blank spaces. I'm talking about that because I see most of the students, this last question about the meaning of the following words, because most of the times you're never asked questions that you're never asked words that most of the times they are words you have never come across. Never ever leave a blank space. Just write something. There was one time I told my students that even if you have nothing to write, because I really hate blank spaces, write for me your name. Write your name in those blank spaces. I wonder how many blank spaces you write your names. Of course, the naughty ones will write their names, and I will punish them after that because of now taking me for a fool. What I meant is write something. Write whatever it is. In this question, never ever leave a blank space. Now, as I went up on that point, I'm saying that is in English. The teacher, because of trying to write answers, you got 2 marks that probably you didn't have gotten if you left them blank spaces. In biology, you didn't leave blank spaces. Out of your guesswork, you got an extra 1 mark. In physics, because of not leaving blank spaces, you got another 2 marks. Because it was, have you ever done an exam and then when the paper comes back, you're like, by the way, when I was writing this was pure guesswork. Imagine I got 2 marks out of this question and I didn't know. What if you left a blank space? There was no chance of getting any mark from a blank space. Do you know? Totally, in total, you will actually almost get 10 marks out of those guessworks. 10 marks will actually move you to the next grade. So the reason why you're in the grade you are in most likely is because you have blank spaces in your paper. In the next exam you do, the one you may end up doing next week as for opener exam, for those who are going back to school, please know, blank spaces are a killer. Don't even try to leave blank spaces. Do your intelligent guesswork. Just write something. You'll also help your brain. So in this question, the last one, where you're supposed to explain the meaning of those words and phrases, even if you don't know the meaning of those words, even if you have never come across them, please write something. There is something we call inference. And I said that in that other video when you talk about comprehensions. Infer. What is to infer? It is when you have no clear meaning of a word, but then you're thinking, you go back to the comprehension or you go back to the excerpt and read that word in the middle of that sentence or the middle of that paragraph. And then you're asking yourself, what did they mean? What is the most probable meaning of this word? Like, for example, the word amorphous. You have never even heard of it. So you go back to the comprehension, or you go back to the excerpt and look for the place where the word amorphous, of course most of the times it's always highlighted. You look for the place where amorphous is found. And then, for example, let me read for you that where amorphous is found. And then you tell me, can you, okay, let me use the word discreet because it's the one I can find easily. Sitting up with an expression of horror on his face. The Madigo Golf Club? No. I've always been very discreet about my private affairs. How did they get the information? It is mine. Now, you've been asked to write about the meaning of the word discreet, and you have never even heard that word. Discreet is never crossed your mind, and now you have to write something and get 1 mark. Go back to the comprehension, go back to the excerpt, and ask yourself, I have always been very discreet affairs. How did they get to the information? It is mine. From that sentence, you're able to almost guess what is the meaning of the word discreet. I've been very discreet about my private affairs. I'm almost asking you to write for me, to type for me what you think is the meaning of the word discreet. Assuming you don't know from this sentence, always use the word, use inference. That is what we say to infer. You're using inference. In this question, the last question, always never leave a blank space. Use inference to answer your questions. And because I see our time is far much spent, we've almost done, I think we've done almost an hour now. I want to actually almost stop it at that so that we are able to conclude this lesson. I want to hope that the next lesson I had scheduled for 2 sessions. I've scheduled for two excerpts. I wanted us to do the excerpt on the fathers, trying to answer the questions together, and the other one for the Samaritan. But again, I realized because maybe being the first lesson I was handling on the excerpts, it took a bit of time. Maybe in the next one, we will not come back to this discussion. We'll go straight into the excerpt. So I will stop it at that. And I hope that if you have any question, any area that you do not understand about the excerpts, I could have left something out. Like, for example, you can be asked many other questions in the middle. Like, for example, where is this taking place? When did this happen? Or you can be asked any question. But trust me, whatever question you are asked, as long as you understand the story, you are good to go. Let me finish by saying that if you have any struggles with your work, any struggles with the set books, and I'll give a word of caution. For those of us who have a habit of reading the guides, that the guide is what you use for you to answer your questions, let me tell you, you are setting yourself up. You're putting yourself in trouble. Because there is no way the teacher's guide, there is no way that small book that I have them. In fact, I have quite a number of books that can help you. But none of them will compensate for reading that book on your own. Find time and read it, however boring it is. I know these books are a bit boring in a sense that they don't have very exciting scenes and very exciting stories and parts where we would be very happy. But imagine if you got time to read this with the right attitude. I enjoy this book so much. Even the political aspect of it, you will enjoy it. And so I ask you that you find time. If you really are interested in passing in English, there's no shortcut. You must read these books. You must understand the story. As long as you understand the plot, you're good to go. And for those of us who keep forgetting, my videos are there. Now I think we are almost finishing with the Samaritan. Kindly look for them and watch them and go through them. I'm hoping maybe they may enhance your understanding of the story. And therefore, I want to stop it at that and wish you well, and hope that even as we carry on, you will find time to practice. Practice, practice makes perfect. And so thank you very much. I will see you in the next one when we'll be discussing about something else, maybe the excerpt, maybe the essays, and maybe even the poems. And so thank you for watching. And the video will be available. Kindly just share it with your friends. And even as you go back to school, for those who are going back to school, share with your friends and tell them there is a YouTube channel that you know that may help you, so that when you come back over midterm and over August holiday, you will find us, and they will come and watch, and they will be helped. And my contact is on the description box. Feel free to check on me and let me know what it is you're struggling with, and if there's something I can do to help you. Asante sana.